So I'm going to show you how to make straps. These are good for strappy back dresses, for like straps for the shoulders. Use on bikinis, like wired bikinis tend to use these straps. I'm going to show you how to do it both on a regular sewing machine and on a serger. So I'm going to start on a regular sewing machine. So you're going to cut a length of fabric. It doesn't have to be perfectly clean. If you can get one side pretty straight, that's great, but it's going to be folded over and trimmed, so it's not a big deal. So you're going to put, this is the right side of the fabric, you're going to put right side fabric down. And you're going to get some elastic. This is 3/4 width elastic, if I can find the end of it. And I've got my sewing machine set to the widest zigzag and like a medium width, or a medium length of stitch. So you're going to stitch a few stitches. Now, what's happening with this elastic is, generally speaking, when you put elastic in something, you're stretching it so that it's a bit shorter than this fabric you're sewing it to. For straps, if you do that, just do it very slightly. You don't want to have this super gathered. You want this pretty flat. So I'll go like that much, just like a little bit. So you're going to line everything up, and you're just going to sew right on the edge here. Oh, I should mention, so same with all my sewing with spandex, is once you get everything lined up and you're holding it, you're going to stretch it away from the needle in both directions and hold it taut there before you start sewing. At no point while the machine's going should you stretch harder or loosen up on the stretch. You want to keep it consistent. So I stop. I'm lining it up again. Get a little bit of stretch on that, and stretch all the way. So as you can see, I don't have any overhang of spandex. It's just right on the edge there. So again, line it up, stretch it. Going to trim that down. One final one. So as you can see, it's got a bit of a lettuce edge going on because even with stretching it a little bit, it still ends up that there's more bulk in there than what it's expecting, which is what you want. That's going to give you a nice flat strap that's going to have the best degree of stretch. If you have a short elastic, then it's going to be bunchy and it's not going to give you a nice look once you're wearing it. So what's going to happen now is, with it on a wide stretch again, you fold it over once. You see it from there? And then you fold it over a second time. You pull it so that the spandex is wrapped really tight around the elastic, and put it in your machine. So you're going to get a couple stitches in. I like making this a little bit longer than I need because the beginning ends up a little bit messy to get it through. So again, so we do the roll once, roll twice, make sure it's all pulled tight, and then once again you're going to hold it behind and in front of your machine, pull it tight, and then sew. And you're going to sew right up the middle. If you don't keep it right up the middle perfectly, it's fine. It's a strap. I'm definitely losing my sewing machine here. Again, pull tight, turn it around. You end up letting off the stretch at the end here, so you're going to end up just cutting off the end because it gets ugly. So this is what you've got. So now what you do is you pull this back like this, and you trim the excess away. It's going to take some practice. Be sure you don't get any of your sewing. But you're going to want to trim as close to that as possible. So stretch it away from the seam. And cut close to the seam. Take your time. If you cut your thread, it's not the end of the world. You're just going to want to stitch over it. Trim off your ugly end on the other side. And there you go. You've got strapping. So now to do that with a serger, again, right side down. And I'm actually going to cut this shorter because like I don't need it that long to demonstrate how to do this. So we're going to have it on a number 4, so it's the longest stitch length. Neutral differential feed. Your width, it really doesn't matter. I'll put it on a medium. Get it through. Stretch that slightly. Stretch it all the way. And then this part is exactly the same. You just roll it, stick it in your machine. And when you have to stop and restretch or reposition, you want your needle down. I didn't there. Oh, it didn't actually do it, but what it can do is it can skip a stitch at that point. Again, not the end of the world, but if you can remember to keep your needle down when you stop, then it'll prevent that. So again, you're just cutting as close to that as possible. Stretching the fabric out in a way helps get a nice close cut. The ugly end off. There you go. You got your strap. It's nice and durable. And then I should say the same with this one. Like that's no serger, but it works fine. So strapping. So I'm going to show you the other way to do straps. This way here encloses it completely without the need for top stitching. And it also has the elastic completely sewn into it. So it's not a tube with an elastic running loose in it. It's just one piece elastic. So I find this is the nicest, most professional way. It's also the quickest, especially if you have a serger, because it's just one pass of sewing as opposed to sewing or zigzagging it, serging or zigzagging it down, flipping it, sewing it, and then trimming it. This, you just sew it and flip it. So how you do this is first you have to determine how wide your strap needs to be, your strap fabric. Where the other version, you don't really need to do that because you can trim it at the end. This, you need to be pretty exact with it. So what you're going to do is you're going to start with your elastic. You determine the width of your elastic. And what you need to do is add the width of your elastic to the width of your seam. So I use a 1/4 inch seam. This is about a 1/2 inch elastic. So we come up with 3/4. Multiply that by 2. So it's seam allowance plus elastic times 2. So we came up with 1.5 inches. So what I'm going to do is just trim this. I can go by here and see that this is going to be 1.5 inches when I do this. I'm going to cut that. So basically what happens is you come up with a strap that when you fold it over, it's going to be the width of your elastic. That's actually wider. I think I grabbed the wrong line when I did that. But anyways, it's going to be the width of your elastic plus your seam allowance. This is a bit wider because I screwed up when I cut it, but basically that's the idea. Is when it's folded over, you just want the seam allowance amount overhanging here. Now it works for other sizes of elastic also. For instance, if I do, I'm just lining this all up so I can get a nice straight edge. This one here is a 1-inch elastic, as you can see. So for that, we would do 1 inch plus 1/4 inch, so 1 1/4 times 2, which would be 2 1/2. So we're going to go 2 1/2. Get that even. Cut that. And this is going to be what we need to sew our strap. So when I fold this one over, this one should be more accurate. We've got the width of the elastic plus the seam allowance. Put your right sides of your fabric, fold them together so that the edges meet up, and place your elastic right on the edge like that. Here, feed it into your serger or your zigzag. This does work with a zigzag also. So that your edges stay lined up and your elastic's there. Of course, this isn't going to be clean as I start. So now I like to use a long stitch width, and I use the neutral differential feed for this because I like my stretch to come from manually stretching it. But see, as you can see, I've got everything lined up. I'm just going to get the back end of it and pull. And I'm just going to sew the length of this. Try to keep everything as even as possible the whole way to avoid any ruffling on this edge. So chain off a fair amount, like, what is that, like 6 inches or so? Then we're going to take a cord threader, all kinds of different names for it, and just run it through to the other side. When you come to this side, just tie off your end here. I like to use a relatively short thread here, like I don't like to have it super long on this end. I just feel like that gives it more opportunity to break. You want to be gentle with this part because if you break this, then you have to start all over again. So basically try and feed this elastic through that end just to get it started. A little bit. Be gentle and pull it through. And you'll just work the rest of the way like that. And then as you finish, you've got your covered strap. I was a little bit loose on it as I was sewing it, so you see it's not quite tight. But once you're wearing it, it stretches out and there's no slack to it at all. So that's that strap technique. So I've shown you how to use the serger to do this strap. I'm going to show you how to do it on a wide one, and then I'll show you how to use a zigzag machine to do it on without a serger. So I just trim that off. So you're going to fold your fabric so that it's right side facing right side. Edges matched up. And your elastic is on the edge here. Stitch down to secure. So now usually you'd match your thread up to what you're doing, but I didn't because this is just demo. So you're going to want to keep this fold even the whole way. So as much as you can match that up and hold it and not mess with it, the better. I'm using a long stitch length, the 1/4 inch. You want to stick to the same width that you said that you'd use for your estimations, and a neutral differential feed. So what I'm going to do is stitch this down flat. I'm not stretching the elastic any more than the fabric it's being sewn to, but together I'm stretching them. So just as you go, make sure to keep the edges even. Everything flat and stretch. So I like to chain off there. Then you're going to use a cord threader and go in the loop of fabric. And I just did a short one here for demonstration. You can do this any length you want. The longer you go, the bigger risk you have that your thread's going to break as you go. Just, I guess, law of averages or something here. The longer it's going to be, the more chance you've got for it to break. If you break, it's a bit of pain in the butt. So I'll usually go relatively conservative on how long I'm cutting my straps. When doing this method anyways. So then you're going to do this so that you're feeding the elastic into the loop that you just made. And it's good to give it a little bit of a head start so that you're putting less pressure on the actual thread itself. It's a little bit fussier where it's the wide one. So anyways, get that going. The other thing is that the wide elastic gives you more resistance than the more narrow, like 3/8 inch elastic goes. So you really, when you give it this head start, you're really helping ensure that you're not putting a whole ton of pressure on this as you pull it through. It's even right there, you can hear that my thread wants to break. So I'll usually try and move this forward as much as I can. And then guide it, like hold the actual fabric underneath and guide it. So I'm not pressuring that little bit of chained off seam. Once you get going, you can just pull it through. I'm sure I'm making this look way more difficult than it needs to because I don't want my thread to break on camera. Because that would be fussy. So just give it as much help as you can, getting it through. Then as soon as you can get a hold of that, you can pull it through and be more rough with it. It's fine. And then you've got a perfectly covered strap. You've got that very neat seam. That's just flat and perfect. Because you stretched it as you were sewing it, it's very durable. It's going to stretch as far as that elastic was meant to stretch. Finally, I will show you the regular. Now, if you have a chance to do this on a serger, it will 100% be easier. But it works the same way. Where you're going to take your elastic, fold it over. I'm actually going to put it a little bit more towards the fold, just because I know I cut it a little bit too big. You're just going to sew that down. And try to keep your seam so it's right on the edge here, so you've got that 1/4 inch going along this side of the elastic. This is quite a bit longer than I need. Just keep everything matched up. See, as you can see, it's got a little bit more flaring out on this side now. So what I recommend doing when you're using a sewing machine instead of a serger, you've only got 2 threads here, which is nowhere near as strong. So anyways, rather than use this and a cord threader, I recommend cutting a little bit extra elastic and using a safety pin. The bigger the safety pin, the easier, but I'm lucky I found this one, so we're going to go with it. So you're just going to flip that into itself here. Give it a bit of a head start. And when you're doing it with a safety pin, it's definitely easier to do shorter lengths than a long one. That's something nice about the cord threader is that you can pull. Like when you're doing the 3/8 inch elastic like this, it's really easy to do longer lengths with the cord threader. This works too, you just have to have a little bit of patience. And honestly, even with fussing with this, it's still quicker and easier than doing the wrap method with the top stitching. But this is part of why. This is one reason why having a serger is really nice. So if you're going to be doing a lot of it, I definitely recommend getting a serger. You can get them used. You know, it's just the amount of time it saves, the amount of hassle, the extra durability it gives. I highly recommend it. When I started sewing, I was actually afraid of sergers, and I didn't want to even learn how to thread it. And I got over that. And then once I got my serger, I would never look back. You totally can, though. I mean, my first few years of sewing career, I did it with just a sewing machine with straight stitch and zigzag. And people paid me a lot of money to make skating dresses with my little straight stitch and zigzag machine. So you can definitely do it. Okay, so you just work that through. And this one's a little bit baggier because, as I said, I wasn't as accurate when I cut it. But even still, once it's worn, like if I weren't to redo that, you can't really tell once it's stretched. It's just if you do measure accurately, you get the nice clean, like this, or like this, that was cleanly measured. But yeah, that's how you do your strap.